Well, we like to talk about haunted places and places with sinister backgrounds when we do talk about places.
What better places to visit?
And obviously, abandoned places are pretty interesting, especially when those abandoned places are pretty intense or sinister looking. And so I came across reference to a Khovrino Hospital in Moscow.
Now, this is another one of the episodes that we plucked from our list.
Yeah, we've got our list, and we, like I think we mentioned, we sort of sort them randomly, run a random number, and then we sort of look at it and see what's coming up to kind of give ourselves sort of a challenge, if you will.
Yeah, a shake-up, a challenge.
Something that we're not so familiar with. So this is new to both Eric and I. But we have Khovrino Hospital in Moscow. Now, we've also seen reference to it being Khovrino with no K, or even Hovrinskaya, which I think, as I told Eric, I think that might be an American trying to say the Cyrillic spelling, which we know Cyrillic doesn't translate directly into English.
Well. Yeah.
So we're going to say Khovrino. That's what we're going to go with.
We have compared our notes, and we've decided, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's Khovrino for tonight.
But this is a nice, big, scary-looking, abandoned hospital with all manner of urban legend and even some fully documented sinister activity. So that's tonight. We talk about Khovrino Hospital.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
So this hospital is built in Moscow in a district of the same name, near a railway station with the same name. So apparently they're not very original when they're naming things in Moscow. So it's Khovrino Hospital in Khovrino District near Khovrino Railway. Now, it had a design which is common to many others within the Soviet Union. The hospital was designed to resemble the shape of a sort of a star. Some people call it a demented snowflake. Some people compare it to the biohazard symbol. It's got a weird shape. If you look it up online, that's sort of its trademark.
Kind
There'll
of
be pictures of it.
Nuclear symbol. Yeah. Some say Resident Evil.
Yeah. It has branching corridors, and at the end of each point, with the three wings of the building come together in a central point that forms 3 courtyards. Now, there are 10 stories above ground, 4 below, with one of these floors supposedly housing a secret lab, according to many conspiracy theories. And we're going to talk about a lot of conspiracy theories, because there's not a whole lot documented, but there's still a lot of stories.
Well, let me jump in. We talked a little bit about the architecture. The architecture is actually, it has a classification, a label called the brutalist style.
Now, that sounds serious.
That sounds horrible.
But it's almost... But not really. It's kind of a simplistic
all
thing.
That means, it sounds ominous, but it's rather just plain and dull style of architecture. Brutalist buildings are known for their minimalist construction that highlights the raw building materials that they're made out of, structural elements instead of focusing on lavish decorative carvings and accents. Most brutalist buildings are brick, concrete, angular, geometric shapes, and they're always muted, almost like into a monotone. You would see it in a black and white photo, kind
of.
Well,
they wouldn't paint them as much as just highlight the natural materials that were used to build them.
You're not going to see bold colors and all this.
And they're usually made of brick and concrete, and then geometrically shaped, not a lot of round edges or anything like that. Now, this hospital was designed to have a capacity of 1,300 beds. I mean, again, 10 stories up, 4 down. Huge hospital complex.
Now I don't know, did you say 1980 is when it was?
Yeah. Construction began in 1980 and was brought to a halt in 1985.
Never finished.
Now, due to the unfinished construction, parts of the building only contain fragments of walls and floors, and the basement was prone to flooding, which may have been the primary reason why they quit construction. Now, explanations for the abandonment of construction do range from lack of funding to possible shortcomings which emerged in the project, which led to the abandonment. More outlandish explanations, such as hauntings and even zombie uprising, have been postulated. Although, again, the most likely reason is that the waterproofing of the basement floors was done incorrectly, resulting in the lower floors becoming flooded. I believe, the hospital was to be built by the river Likaborka and the surrounding wetlands. There was also urban legends about the hospital being built on an old cemetery, which lead to it being haunted and ill-favored.
If you don't complete a structure, you don't have all the windows in or whatever, you don't have all the drainage complete.
Yeah, they didn't really
you would expect a basement to flood.
But yeah, apparently they didn't do the land survey correctly, and they misjudged the density of the ground. So as they built more and more, I think it basically started to sink, and that caused the floors to flood and things. But back to being built upon an old cemetery. Apparently, they didn't relocate the graves.
That happens so often.
Well, it happens in the movie Poltergeist.
Even if you legitimately pay a company, which there are companies that specialize in this, depending on the age of that cemetery, let's face it, you're not going to get everything.
Yeah.
And then you have those companies who
take the money and
run.
Dig some holes.
They dig a few holes and say, "Yep, we're done." So
now, due to its nature as an unfinished construction, of course, being dangerous to visitors, it was considered unsafe by the surrounding community. I believe they put fences up to keep people from getting in there. And it
that didn't
remained,
seem to work, by the way.
No, and it remained there, just unfinished and falling apart for years upon years upon years.
Just with the trees growing up all around it in the middle. It's in Moscow. It's right there by the main city, but it just looked out of place.
It's a scary looking place.
Yeah, it's like Walking Dead should have been filmed there.
I saw a reference, that exact quote. Somebody was like, if they were going to film Walking Dead in Russia, this was where they'd do it.
Yeah. This thing was huge.
Well, Khovrino is well known among fans of urban legends as one of the most mysterious places in Moscow. And among urban explorers, the hospital earned the name The Umbrella because of people saying it resembles the symbol of Umbrella Corporation.
Resident Evil.
From the Resident Evil series. And again, it sort of looks like the Biohazard symbol, which, coincidentally, the Japanese name for Resident Evil is Biohazard. That's what they call them in Japan, is the Biohazard series.
Huh.
Now, since the mid-'80s, the hospital was a frequent place for urban explorers and industrial climbers to visit. And there are urban legends about ghosts of hospital staff, which seems weird for a hospital that was never in operation.
Never opened.
But ghosts nonetheless. Satanists, the homeless, and other criminal elements roaming the grounds. Some say you can hear the screams and cries of children up and down the dark corridors. Now again, not abandoned hospital as much as abandoned construction. It was never an active hospital.
Some of the people that come up with the urban legends is like, at least do a little history.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, they see a hospital and they think, well, that's what No, it was never a hospital. It was never an operation.
Now, graffiti, of course, that goes
the graffiti
hand in hand.
is all over the place.
Probably the most notable graffiti sign painted there in the hospital, and like New York style. The hospital is a land of wonders. I entered and disappeared there.
I saw one. It was a graphic, but it was two chunky yellow stars like you'd see on the Hardee's logo.
Yeah.
One was vomiting blood. The other was passing blood from another particular.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that. It's like that a
That's
bad Hardee's commercial
looking.
Or what?
Now, those people who have explored it say you can also hear other strange and unexplained sounds, and many say they have feelings of being watched, which could be otherworldly, or could be the fact that this is a known refuge for, again, Satanists, the homeless, drug users. There are stories of serial killers being
You don't know if you're
active.
being watched by the dead, the undead, or the living.
Yeah. Psychics who have visited the hospital speak of the souls there that cannot find peace. And again,
That would have to refer back
it
to
would
a
have to be the cemetery. It wouldn't be from people who died in the hospital.
Either
Well,
or they just didn't do their work.
people have died in the hospital since, but not when
Yeah.
it was a hospital,
Right.
Not that it ever was a hospital. Some visitors claim to have seen full-body apparitions, while others have seen weird cone-shaped silhouettes moving about the building.
Now, I thought that was unique. I come across that
was
cone shape.
Weird.
Like tornadoes, or were they flipped upside down?
I don't know.
It didn't say.
Well, and one of the things I read was that apparently it was a military cemetery, like certain riflemen, certain rifle division used it as a graveyard. So I don't know if maybe that might be part of something. I don't know. But not all the spirits that roam the halls of Khovrino Hospital are sinister
naughty or bad.
Local stories do tell of the friendly spirit known as Ralph, who would allegedly help lost people find their way out of the hospital and would also rescue trapped people, including moving debris, like if something fell and landed on them.
Wow.
And helping people to get out of elevator shafts, of which I believe there are 11 open elevator shafts in the hospital.
That doesn't seem safe.
No, it wouldn't be. Now, every year it is said that dead bodies are found in and around the hospital, with some accounts saying the number of bodies range from 6 to 17 per year. Now, one of the earliest stories of anything sinister, strange, unusual happening, in 1985, an elderly woman who lived close to the hospital went in search of her lost little dog. Now, Eric and I are dog owners, and if I was missing my dog, I would definitely want to go find my dog.
Absolutely.
We don't
love
really,
our little fur mutts.
We don't let them out of the fence. But every now and then, you open the gate and they take off running, and boy, when they get that taste of freedom, they just want to go. Anyway, this elderly woman, she went in to look for her lost dog, and after entering the abandoned hospital looking for her pet, she found her dog, mutilated.
Yeah.
In the hallway with its feet bound. And in the same corridor, she found the corpses of several other animals nearby. Obviously, someone was torturing these poor animals, killing them.
It said some were like chained up. Some had been like ripped apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she went to the police, and they just kind of ignored her. They had other things to do. They were too busy, whatever. I believe they basically told her, just go home and don't go back there. That was their advice.
Well, and they're already at this point vagrants and homeless and drug deals. I think they knew.
It probably wasn't a safe place to be.
Yeah,
not for
I think
an
they
elderly
knew that.
woman.
It's like, look, you old lady, you need to go home and mind your business.
Well, not satisfied with her response, she eventually returned to Khovrino Hospital and tried to track down the animal serial killer or killers for herself. I don't know if she was searching for more. I don't think she thought she was going to take them down, but I think she was definitely searching for more evidence, something she could bring to the police to bring them back. She never returned from the hospital. Somehow, moving about in the dark, she apparently disappeared. Sometime later, a group of boys exploring the basement levels of the hospital discovered the elderly woman's body floating in a body of water. Examination of her body revealed that she had suffered serious injuries, massive injuries to her back and lower torso, with both legs broken and shattered. The examiners determined that she must have fallen from some great height, but the room she was found in had a perfectly intact ceiling. Where did she fall from? In 1990, a woman was found murdered inside the hospital. One of the most notorious stories of the hospital, and this one's pretty crazy.
Just the young girl in the basement with her face?
No.
Oh, I have that one.
Oh, I didn't find that.
Well, continue then. I don't want to interrupt.
In the 90s, there was a group in Russia called the Nemostor Satanist sect.
Oh, yes.
And they decided they were going to call this place home. Now, the group started small with about 10 members conducting rituals in Bitsa Park. In 1986, the growing group moved their ritualistic sacrifices of both animals and humans into the abandoned hospital's basement.
And I got to say, the pictures I saw, like from the newspapers, this was full-blown Hollywood. I mean,
yeah.
Black
it was that kind of
they
crazy.
Had like bird masks on and, pentagrams painted on the wall in the background. And
now, as time went by, the cult grew in size to about 50 people, with members mostly from the lower levels of society, drug addicts, vagabonds, alcoholics, that type of folks. But there were also people that would be considered normal, if not fanatical. They would have blended in, except for, their crazy devotion to their faith, which, they established an altar in one of the basement's levels and held their rituals there. And the stories say their victim count grew to several thousand if you count the pets and the children and the homeless individuals. Basically, if you disappeared in the Khovrino district, it was assumed that these guys got you.
They got you.
Now, police apparently had become alerted to what was going on and decided they needed to do something. Obviously, you have people disappearing. You got this Satanist group killing people. You got to get involved.
It's bad enough to have dogs disappear, but when you start having human sacrifices.
Well, police observed the hospital for quite some time, and when they were certain that all members of the group were inside, the police and a unit known as Oman, which was like a SWAT team almost, an advanced tactics kind of thing, they were known to be very, very aggressive. They conducted a raid on the hospital, but the members of the sect refused to back down. And the story goes they were driven into one of the basement levels and were either all shot and killed, or another story is the police placed explosives at either end of a hallway and detonated it to trap them all inside, either killing them all or trapping them. The ones that didn't get killed wouldn't be able to get out, and then allowed the basement to flood.
I had read, and it kind of goes to what you were saying of how brutal that group was. They chased them with grenades that they threw down after them, and then basically sealed them from escape.
Now, officially, there's no record of this police action ever happening.
Of course not.
Well, again, okay, you're talking about Russia. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But there was documented evidence of them at one point ousting a satanic group from that particular location. So,
well, I had mentioned, and it's a short story, but 1990s, there was definitely an accounted young girl that was murdered. At one point, the police were called to the site for a report of a human corpse found in the basement. Now, from what I understood, this portion was not totally like flooded, but, it would have a couple inches of water in it. It was, a very damp environment. But upon responding, the police found, as they found their way to the basement, they indeed found a young girl believed to be in her mid-20s, maybe early 30s, with her face severely disfigured. It appeared as if someone or something literally clawed her face off, was what the newspaper article said. Speculation and urban legends, of course, gave rise to other stories that possibly she went mad while she was here in the hospital for whatever reason. And she did this to herself so that she would not see the ghosts and spirits chasing her. I did find a bit more information on the police case, actually. They believe that she did die of natural causes and that rodents and animals who shared the building simply started eating the soft tissue, unfortunately, of the face area. However, there was a breakthrough when, I guess it sounded like years, maybe a decade later, they had kept DNA and they went back and found DNA underneath the woman's fingernails that was not her own. And with that, they were able to question and eventually arrest a suspect for murder that had been tied to other suspect murders in that vicinity. Didn't say he was a member of the sect cult group, but possibly just another serial killer. So we don't really know what happened to her, but it was pretty gruesome. Now, as you mentioned, as far as the ghost hunting aspect, I didn't find a tremendous amount. Many bloggers, amateur ghost hunters, they've toured the old structure, and almost all of them do have, strange things that have happened. Footsteps, whispers, crying, screaming. Many claim that they saw shadow-like figures that would sometimes chase them, other times just kind of watch them. Several photographs can be seen of what they are describing as wispy, shadowy-like figures. I looked at probably 30 or 40 of these. I saw 3 or 4 that definitely raised an eyebrow. But in my mind, it was so vague. The stories were second, third hand. It wasn't like we have definitive proof this camera was set up here and we caught that. It was just a lot of little snapshots and some things. I don't know if you encountered or come across anything different.
I saw some pictures, but I kind of felt the same way you did. The pictures, some of them could have been compelling, but a lot of them, it was just subject to interpretation.
Yeah.
So now there were several other groups of Satanists that had used the hospital over the years. One of those groups was the Black Cross, and they were supposedly conducting dark rituals on the 5th floor in a special room hidden behind a retractable wall in the early 2000s. And going back to the graffiti, apparently a lot of the graffiti in certain areas is definitely satanic or demonic kind of, intent or origin. So now another story is that about the memorial that is on the 2nd floor.
Oh, yes.
Dedicated to Alexei Kryushkin. Now, he was a 16-year-old boy who had apparently ended his own life when he threw himself down an open elevator shaft in the building. I believe it was I think his words were poisoned love.
Unhappy love.
Unhappy love, yeah. That's it. And now when police were alerted that he had gone there and they, people concerned about him were worried about, what he might have done. The police, of course, went there and they searched the building for Alexei's body.
Now, a lot of people affectionately called him, he had a kind of a slang term, cray.
Yeah.
Was what they called him.
Well, of course, I believe that some people knew what his intent was to throw himself down an elevator shaft. And the police, of course, checked the bottoms of all the elevator shafts and never found anything at the bottom of any of them. Now, they continued to search, hoping that they would find him. They did finally find Alexei in a side room on the second floor. This is a different floor from the one he would have been expected to be found on if he had jumped from one of the elevator shafts. And it was obvious that he had suffered catastrophic wounds by falling from a great height, just as the elderly woman had before. The room he found in, however, was small and enclosed, and again with a solid ceiling. So, if he fell, how did he end up here?
Yeah. Well, I had found they'd set up the memorial on the second floor, but in two of the story sources, I found that for whatever reason, they believed he jumped from the eighth floor.
And people leave all kinds of things there too.
So in my mind, I immediately jumped to, you're trying to commit suicide. You jump from the second floor, you'd only fall 2 floors. But you said there were 3 or 4 lower basement.
Yeah, there's lower basement levels.
I don't know about the elevator.
And again,
some go full distance, some go certain distances, and then you take a different elevator to get to the basement.
But yeah, I found that it was the 8th floor is where he was supposedly, jumped.
So maybe the 8th floor was just too dangerous for people to go up and leave mementos. I don't know.
People do leave flowers, cigarettes, and poems next to the 8th floor elevator shaft that they believe he jumped from.
Now, did you find where he had left a suicide note?
No.
I didn't
find any reference to that.
That was one of the things that was brought up, although he apparently did share the story that his heart was broken and he was going to go do this, but no suicide note. And it was very strange.
Now, going back to ghost stories, it has been noted several people have reported being disturbed by a glowing entity resembling a tall and slender male when they're in the vicinity of the 8th floor elevator shaft, or that second floor room where Alexei's body was found. Apparently, when this entity becomes aware that it's being observed, it just immediately turns and walks away from the visitors, passing directly through any obstacles that may be in its path.
Well, I will jump in and I will say that, as we kind of alluded to a little bit and talked about, this set, this location would be a perfect backdrop for a series, a movie, and it would stand to reason that such a creepy, scary location could easily be turned into a horror movie. And I will admit, I did try to find, but I couldn't locate it, so obviously I haven't watched. I did see several conflicting stories of at least one movie.
There was a movie that was supposed to be made in 2013, but I also found a movie that was made in 2013, but then another movie with a very similar story that was supposed to be made in the second half of 2015 that never got made.
Yes.
I kind of rolled those two stories together in here.
The 2013 movie was at least supposed to be entitled The Ghost of Khovrino. And in a nutshell, it was kind of a Blair Witch style inspired mockumentary. Said it was shot on site in 2013. And the movie's plot was that 4 friends decided to investigate the forest around Khovrino Hospital, which, as I had said, for that 5 or 6 years, nobody did anything with this. There's huge trees that was growing up around it and stuff. It wasn't just like an open field with some brush. I mean, there were trees.
And even with the trees, apparently there was one ancient oak tree that was on the property that was, by all accounts, healthy, that just toppled over one day in the middle of the day with a huge crash.
Yes. Yep. Totally healthy tree, supposedly. Now, the movie's plot is that these 4 friends investigate the forest around there, and where ancient sorcerers were rumored to sacrifice people.
But yeah, even in the movie, I think the idea was they were going to fake their encounters with it to make the movie.
Thus the Blair Witch aspect.
Yeah, and then apparently the things they were going to fake then became real or something like that. They actually ran into something in the woods.
Now, as we were talking, it's a little unclear if it was 1 movie, 2 movies, but later on in what that was called 2015, later half of 2015, I found reference that plans were made to start the filming of, again labeled as a Blair Witch style horror documentary, simply titled Khovrino, about the abandoned hospital. So either we have 2 films, possibly neither coming to full completion, at least being released in the United States, or at the very least, the name change of a single movie. But I did find mention of a man in charge of the referenced 2015 film was a Sergei, and I'm going to butcher this, Sergei Kuznetskov. Something like that.
Nice Russian name. I would have said Sergei.
Sergei?
Or Sergei. I don't know. I'm not Russian. Sergei. I don't know.
Sergei Kuznetsov. Cuts his nuts off? That's bad.
That's honestly where my mind went when you said that. I was like, that sounds terrible.
Okay, we'll leave that one.
Well, in July of 2012, the decision was made to demolish the hospital and the adjoining buildings that were part of that construction and begin the construction of 2 new buildings. In October of the same year, the building and the land were put up for auction, with the auction being held in December that year, with an initial value of nearly 1.8 billion rubles, which most everyone said was significant overpriced for the
way
land.
Overpriced for what it was.
On November 15th in 2014, the deputy mayor stated that the building would be put up for demolition to prepare for the construction of a new healthcare facility.
Because, I mean, let's face it, if we had a cemetery, we bulldoze that down, we build a hospital, that didn't work, let's bulldoze that down, we'll try this, that didn't work, let's reinvent it again.
Well, at the end of March 2015, it was again announced that the government was considering the possibility of demolishing the hospital and that it was going to cost an estimated somewhere around the cost of, again, 1 billion rubles. It was going to cost that much to demolish it. April 2016, the city authorities announced that the dismantling of the building would begin in the following summer, and plans were again made to sell the land at auction to attract investors. Obviously, none of this ever came to be, and the hospital was eventually demolished in October and November timeframe in 2018. So you had this sinister-looking building, I mean, and really just a very strange shape to it, with all these urban legends and people of all sorts, sinister and whatnot, lurking in the halls. So,
well, I mean, started in 1980, stopped in 1985, so 5 years building, was never completed. I did come across some stories, urban legends, unproven, alleged, that it was hard to keep a work crew on site because of strange mishaps. Now, not necessarily ghostly apparitions, but mechanical failures, feeling like someone blew in your ear, was touching your back, and it kind of creeped out a lot of the construction crews. So I did find reference that could have been at least one aspect of another reason why it wasn't finished in a timely manner. And again, Russia's, porking the bill out for this, but usually with construction, there are expectations, landmarks of, at this date, we need to have this completed. And it just simply didn't happen, and it came off the hinges.
Well, and again, if you have a building and the basement's flooding and again, like I said, the survey results weren't good. They thought the ground was much more stable than it turned out to be. Like you said, over the years, apparently the hospital sank a significant amount into the ground.
Well, and it was close to a river.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this was like a wetlands area even. They drained it.
Marshy, yeah.
But apparently they didn't drain it properly, and so it just routinely would flood again.
Now, I don't know if it's a product of the age of my raising. We've talked a little bit about this in some of the other podcasts of how we were brought up during the Cold War. And I have this prerequisite that Russians seem to push through a lot of the red tape that United States, I think, has way too much of.
Go back to Chernobyl, I mean.
But yeah, they seem to kind of get the cart ahead of the horse a little bit too much.
They were you wanted progress no matter the cost.
Yeah. So, good way to put it.
Well, I mean, I think that's about it for Khovrino Hospital. If we want to talk about some headlines.
Let's do.
Well, mine is from Mix 93.1 KTYL by Lucky Larry.
Nice radio voice.
Dated July 24th, 2024, not that long ago. This abandoned Texas hospital is the most haunted place on earth. Now, that's a big claim to make.
Now, where is this?
This is located in East Texas.
East Texas, okay.
Anyone from the Piney Woods knows that Jefferson Hotel in Jefferson, Texas is the scariest and most haunted place in East Texas, known for its playful ghosts and the spirits that are haunting and roaming the rooms and hallways. But there is a more famous haunted location worth visiting in Texas, too. The abandoned Yorktown Memorial Hospital in Yorktown, Texas. This place has been hailed as one of the most haunting experiences in Texas, and has been named one of the most haunted places in Texas, and called the most haunted place on earth by a contributor of The Sun. Looking at the pictures of this old hospital on the official Facebook page, you can clearly see why this place looks like it should be haunted. Overgrown and unmanicured trees and bushes line the outside of the hospital, and broken windows, peeling paint, and old medical equipment are all over the place. Beds, dolls, and toys just randomly left laying around in the rooms. And if you've ever found a doll that's kind of left to rot, they get weird. They make you feel uncomfortable. The hallways are dark and dingy and barely lit by sunlight. People who've taken tours reported that some of the eyes on the dolls glow red, along with dolls that speak. Others feel the presence of people who once inhabited the hospital, and they can hear the whispers of former patients. Others say the hospital itself gives off a few spine-tingling noises. Now, the hospital was founded in 1951 by the Felician Sisters of the Roman Catholic Church and operated for more than 30 years. The facility closed in 1986 and was left almost as is. After the hospital closed, the building functioned as a drug rehab until it was closed by the state in 1992. Since then, the building has been sitting vacant and slowly decaying and rotting away. Now, here's what some who have toured Yorktown Memorial Hospital had to say. Summer James Mott said on Facebook, "This place is a real gym for those looking for a haunting experience. The vibes are definitely creepy and unsettling. Eddie provides great entertainment and makes the whole tour fun. Stephanie was a pleasure to book with and was very quick to reply to any questions I sent to her after. We had a great time, and my daughter even caught a ghostly face in one of her pics, and my son caught a pic of what looks like a nun holding a young girl. We will definitely be going again."
A nun holding a young girl.
Also on Facebook, Christine Smith said, "My boyfriend and I toured the hospital on June 29th. It was a huge bucket list item for me, and it did not disappoint. Eddie was an incredible host. The hour flew by with his enthusiastic storytelling and colorful descriptions of what went on at the hospital. Although there was no dramatic spiritual encounters, I definitely felt a female presence in the kitchen that stood near my boyfriend each time we entered. We went in there 3 separate times, the third to make sure I was sensing her and not my imagination. The tour is worth it no matter what your level of belief is. Thank you, Eddie, for the incredible time and a lifetime of memories." So if you're up for hearing the whispers of some of the former inhabitants, or you want to see if you can feel a presence or to experience anything else paranormal, you'll find that you need to schedule a proper tour of the hospital through their Facebook page. And once on the tour, you'll hear about the patients being killed by doctors who made surgical mistakes, patients who were neglected, and who these spirits like and don't like. Now keep in mind, it is never wise to enter or explore old abandoned facilities because you don't know the condition of the building and you could be trespassing. Other than that, happy exploring and ghost hunting.
Pay attention to that, kids. Well, I had to ask where, because my headline is something, again, very similar. Abandoned, haunted hospitals obviously have a big interest in legends and lore. Besides maybe a cemetery or battlefield, it stands to reason why we would almost expect some of these locations to be hot spots for paranormal activity. So I grabbed my headline for tonight's episode on some other most haunted hospital sites around the world. And I had to dig a little bit, but I found a site called nurseslab.com that apparently has some unique insight from most of its collected stories being from nurses who have worked at the hospitals themselves or had secondhand accounts like with their mothers that worked at the hospital. I'm not going to get into all the details of the article because, seriously, there was probably 12 or 15 hospitals that was listed. That one was one listed, but not one I chose. I'm just going to share 2. The first one is a Royal Hope Hospital in Florida, here in the good old USA. Now, first on the list, this hospital is located in Florida. It's known to many by its gruesome history. Royal Hope Hospital was a Spanish military hospital from 1784 to 1821. Again, me, the history guy, I got to go back in history. And was eventually demolished through time. Finally, a replica of the original hospital was built to house the victims during the Seminole War. However, when the city workers were about to repair the water lines and penetrated the area of the oldest part of the building, they found out that the hospital was originally built on what appeared to be ancient Native American burial grounds. Visitors of the Spanish Military Hospital Museum would often mention qualities of groans and shouts coming from the unoccupied rooms, adding up to the chill, the ill beds, as they called them, for the sickly, was moving around on the place. They could hear them being rolled on the wheels upstairs. Beverage jars sliding across the floors, outside seats, and the frequenting sounds of marching feet and unfilled stairways. Frequently encounters of strange events and apparition sightings were told and still being experienced by the guests. Now, paranormal experts once claimed that the place is a real breeding ground of haunted Florida soul and paranormal movement. I thought that was a statement. Also, according to them, these sorts of hauntings inclines to be present in those zones where humans feeling emotion is or was the focus at the time, which that kind of stands to reason. Sanitariums, mental institutions, hospitals. You got a lot of ill treatment at the time when it may have even been scientifically okayed.
Some of that early stuff was
horrible
bad
stuff. But my second example is Whitingham Hospital in England. Whitingham Hospital was a psychiatric hospital in the parish of Whitingham, near Preston, Lancaster, England. It opened in 1873 as the 4th Lancaster County Asylum and grew to be the largest mental hospital in all of Britain. However, in 1967, the hospital faced controversy involving complaints of mistreatment, like we were just talking, in 2 male and 2 female wards of the St. Luke's Division, with the worst being in Ward 16 for women. Complaints were reported such as patients being locked in small rooms under staircases, in washrooms, and outside in the airing courts, stripped down almost totally nude, regardless of the weather. Others include patients being dragged by their hair, or what is called the wet towel treatment, where a damp towel would be wrapped around the patient's neck to induce unconsciousness. Nurses setting fire to patients' clothing while it was being worn. Beatings and vermin infestations. An investigation soon ensued, and as a result, both the head male nurse and the matron took early retirement. 2 male nurses were convicted of theft, and in a separate incident, another nurse was jailed for manslaughter after an elderly patient he had assaulted later died. The negative imaginary of the hospital exists for a reason. It offers the kinds of hauntings you most likely would never want to encounter. So, Bill, I think we're to the point of questions. I try not to disappoint you. I've challenged you in the past.
Yes, your questions hurt my brain.
This one's no different.
Why? I'm nice to you.
You try to be nice to me, I know, and I do appreciate it, although I don't show it. My question to you this week, if you and I were to explore a similar site, an old abandoned, potentially haunted hospital asylum location, and Bill, on this night, we both came face to face with the Grim Reaper himself. And for whatever reason, the Grim Reaper, the angel of death on this night, was feeling a bit out of original ideas and somewhat of a slump for his line of work. So he pulls up a chair next to us and he says, "Look, guys, it's been a good long haul, but tonight, both of your times here on Earth, well, it's over. But because I like you and I listen regularly to your podcast, I'm going to let you write your own ending. So tell me, Bill, you're going to go out. How do you want to go out of this world? Would you just want to fall out of a window, maybe impale yourself on some rebar? Or would you rather choose a more Hollywood, climactic, flamboyant outing? And if you need to think about it...
Does it have to be like in the abandoned building? Is that like...
Oh, yeah, that's part of it.
Oh, okay.
Because this is Nightmares on the Lost Highway, and this is how far we go for our listeners. We're putting our life on the line. We're out there investigating. We're hoping that this will be a podcast, but it's the last podcast we'll ever do.
Let's make it cinematic. Like you're in this place, you're trapped. It starts to storm. You don't want to go outside, but
you don't want to stay inside either.
maybe you find yourself on the roof holding on to some kind of metal pole, and then it's just like a big bolt of lightning.
Oh, yeah.
And be like, oh, he was struck down by the force of nature.
I like that. Okay.
I mean, if I have to go,
you got to go.
I want it to be something quick and painless.
No bargaining with the angel of death.
And I would hope if you get electrocuted, like it goes by pretty quick. Like, I don't want the whole building to collapse on me or anything.
I was impaled for 3 days with rebar sticking out of my stomach.
A pitchfork in my guts. Make it a quick one.
Okay, all right. I respect that. Well, for me, I'm a lot of things, but those who know me best may say I get a little long-winded and a little flamboyant at times in storytelling.
No.
Well, it's choice of clothing.
No
sometimes.
One's ever said that, Eric.
My death shall be no different.
What did I tell you last week? Or not last week? Last time we recorded, your long story short is longer than most people's short long story. I mean,
well, it is.
You're wordy.
I've got to take that.
You're wordy.
Your
work emails were the same way.
Yeah.
You would clarify things that needed no clarification.
No clarifications. Like I was addressing a kindergartner. And in some ways I was with some people.
Okay, to be fair, you're supposed to keep it simple, but to
the majority of the crowd.
But a lot of people, one of them, I swear it was like my friend William Bill Weir. Like you could just say Bill Weirs.
Yeah.
I think people would have known who you were talking about.
All right. Constructive criticism. I will take it.
No, I tease. Tease Eric.
I would probably be just stupid enough to attempt some form of reaching out to lost souls on the other side. But let's face it.
Well, if you could make it cinematic, then yeah, like getting drugged down by the.
Well, no, don't take my words.
Well, I didn't.
Don't take my story.
You
already
had to
said
be
yours.
real.
No,
I didn't know I could be creative.
Oh, Bill. See, this is
Eric,
the
you
difference
didn't give me all the
between.
criteria.
I should have addressed Bill in a longer email.
Yes, you should have provided all the information
what the preparation
necessary.
Should be. That's all I've got to say about that. But I would be stupid enough to try to attempt some form of reaching out to the lost souls on the other side. But again, let's face it, I have no professional training at most, if not all these type of circumstances. So I would be unlucky enough to be selected probably by some evil entity, possibly a demonic possessed entity that, it just doesn't end well. But I would like the camera to still be running, filming whatever it was that snuck up behind me as I attempted a sincere, lengthy, flamboyant conversation with what I felt was a lost soul.
You say that, but all I can envision is the scene from the Blair Witch Project where you're like snot-nosed in the camera.
Crying, looking up the nostril.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get everybody killed.
Whatever it is, grabs me, drags me down the hallway, just kind of a shadowy image.
Like an unseen thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shadow entity.
It works better if it's an unseen force.
Yeah. I don't, I'm going to leave a little bit to imagination.
Yeah.
But I would yell back to the cameraman, please tell me you're filming this. In the hopes that, if my life has to go, I want some proof of paranormal activity.
I don't think either one of us is like that overzealous filmmaker, but I also feel like if we were in that situation, that would be like, the first thought is like, oh God, I'm going to die. And the second thought is, please tell me somebody's recording this so there's proof.
Yes, to my point exactly. And then I would like disappear around the corner, but in all Hollywood style, I would like grip the edge of the corner, pull myself back around, just to make sure that the camera got good evidence. And then it would be over. But then I felt sad. So then I'm like, this is Hollywood. Let's plan for a sequel. So I would expect a full-blown novel, a movie on my death and Bill's death.
Book tie.
I don't want to leave Bill out.
A video game.
A sequel might be scripted where I could talk and bargain myself out of whatever situation of entity got me. And then like with Supernatural, I mean, how many times did they get drugged to hell and died and come back?
That's why I stopped watching.
It did get a little
I watched like 12 or 13 seasons or something, but it was like...
How many times are you going to get dragged to hell?
How
many times are you going to die?
They killed the biggest monster they could find just for there to be another big monster. And then, of course, the never-ending pattern of they're working together to kill demons. Sam's got a secret he doesn't tell Dean about.
Yeah.
Dean finds out Sam had a secret. He gets mad at him. They reconcile. They get along. Dean's got a secret he doesn't tell Sam about.
Yes.
Sam finds out. He gets mad.
Did we not learn anything from the last season?
It was the same pattern. Yeah. Every it's the same with The Walking Dead. They were out in the wilds trying to find a place to live, and then they find a place to live. They find a place to live, they screw that up, and they have to go out in the wilds to find a place to live. And it was just that same pattern over and over. It got boring.
Rinse, repeat. Yeah.
I really liked The Walking Dead. I even liked the comic book.
I loved the first 2 to 3 seasons. I really, really did.
And
then I got pulled back in with the
Negan
death
stuff
of Glenn and some of that. But
yeah, the Negan stuff was supposed to be really good, but I never got back into it. So, of course, ever the people to not heed our own advice. Do you have any good stories about looking around or rummaging through an abandoned place?
I actually
do. We haven't talked about.
I actually do. I lived out off of what used to be called Morgan Road many, many years ago, close to Phillipsburg. And just up the road, I mean, it was within walking distance. It was a long walk, but it was within walking distance. There was a state-owned piece of property. There was a water tower there, and I remember these gigantic pine trees. That's all that was there. And it was a really cool place that you could walk. It wasn't necessarily a walking park or anything like that, but it was a place that, a lot of people would walk because the pine needles kept down all the growth underneath. So, it was soft walking, 30, 40 foot tall pine trees. We stumbled across, just like out of a Hollywood movie, this old decrepit 2-story house with a basement, kind of in the middle of that. And later I learned that was the original homeowners, and they had donated the land. So, it stood to reason. We just never had went in that far. We did find a kind of a drive off the road, and there was a gate that was locked, and there was a fence around this portion of the house. Being teenagers, that did not, much less stop us, did not even really slow us down. We jumped that fence real quick. And this house was in bad condition. The steps going upstairs, you kind of walked along the outside edge because you were afraid the board might break in the middle kind of stuff. There were boards missing, I remember, in the living room where you could look down to the basement where there was at least 3 to 4 foot of water. And it wasn't clean water. It was, nasty, ugly water. But I remember going into a bedroom on the main floor, and it was the first time I had ever seen, and again, this takes you back to Depression time frame, where they had used newspapers and just covered the walls as a form of insulation to keep wind from coming through. And I've always been a history buff. I don't know how else to say it. Different histories have interested me. But I started going through there, and these were a lot of like Springfield, St. Louis, even some Lebanon newspapers. And you just peel one back, and my gosh, there was another. And you'd peel it back, and there was another. And they were so brittle.
Yeah.
They'd been wet and everything. But I found myself going back there several times, honestly, just to go look at these old newspapers. Well, finally, I had the nerve to go up steps and made it upstairs. I'd only went upstairs maybe 3 times the entire time. And I found the attic. The attic had a door off the main. There was kind of some living quarters, but then there was a smaller door into the attic. There were chains and shackles in that attic.
Weird.
I thought it was very weird because the house wasn't old enough to be like Civil War era. Like I said, it would have been built more of like in the Depression era, like 1910s, 20s maybe. And then, went through the Depression. When I opened that door, I saw those shackles, and I swear to you, Bill, there was no wind. There was no windows in that area. I didn't open the door with such force. Those shackles moved.
Ooh.
And I had a friend of mine that was with me. He saw it as well. To say we were scared bleepless was an understatement. We just took off running. We're probably 14 at the time frame. And I remember my foot went through one of those steps.
Oh.
It did scratch my ankle. I was lucky. I didn't break anything or sprain it, but it brought blood. And I pulled my leg back out, and Sean, the guy that was with me, we just decided we were getting out of there. We knew we saw a ghost. We didn't see anything, but we were not alone here. All of a sudden, this whole time, never had anything like this. So here we are running down the lane. We jumped that fence. Neither one of us wanted to look back, but we felt whatever it was following us. At that time, I had my truck, which I think I shocked you when I told you the story. I had a jacked up old Dodge truck, KC running board.
Yeah, that didn't seem
running boards, brush guard, KC lights mounted on the roll bars.
Well, if it makes a difference, I was shocked by your truck story. Once upon a time, when I was a young man and first started dating, I would routinely go to dates in a button-up shirt, jeans, boots, and a cowboy hat.
Wow.
So
they're seeing the side of Bill I had never imagined.
Yeah, we were different when we were younger.
Well, we jumped in the truck. I was driving, and I threw it in reverse. There was no place to turn around, so you had to back out. Probably a quarter of a mile. I'm driving backwards. I was speeding. I don't know if there was any little squirrels in the way or not, but it's like, you better get out of the way. Pulled out on the road, right in front of another truck.
Oh.
Old farmer type truck. And I'm sure I scared him as bad as we were scared, but I spun gravel. I took off. We're reeking that we're guilty. We're fleeing from a scene.
Yeah.
This old man had to been, at a glimpse, he was retired. Let's put it that way. and I think probably pushing 70s. I drove on a country gravel road doing 65 miles an hour sliding. This old coot kept up with me.
Wow.
Followed us all the way into town. And at this point, we felt we'd escaped whatever that was. But now this old man,
this guy after
he's going to hunt us. I don't know if that was his family's property. I don't know if he was just pissed off because we pulled out in front of him. But luckily, we were able to lose him. But that's the scariest, weird story I personally can relate that I haven't already shared.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to think about one that I hadn't already shared. There was a friend of mine that I used to run with, and we would go to these kinds of abandoned places, and he knew all the best places to go. And not too far from where he grew up, there was this church that was abandoned.
Oh.
And he took me there one night. He's like, I'm going to show you this place. And we pull up there, and it's not that far out of town. It's not really off the beaten path. I mean, you could drive by and see if there was a car in the parking lot even. And the strange thing is the parking lot was relatively well maintained. The grass looked like it was maintained a reasonable amount. And this is supposed to be an abandoned property, right?
Right.
And from the outside, it's clearly like nobody's using this. And he goes, he says, he's telling me all these stories about times that he's been up there and, his experiences. And we get up there and we go inside and it's, vandalized all real bad inside. And he's telling a story. I guess one time he went in there with like his girlfriend, and while they were in there, the crucifix on the wall like fell and hung upside down.
Oh gosh.
So it's one of those kind of like, oh man. And he's like, and there was a Bible on the pedestal up front, So it
was abandoned, but they just left this stuff?
They like left it. And that's what he said. He's like, it's almost like they just walked out one day and never came back.
Yeah. Which adds another whole creepiness aspect.
But even like the pages of the Bible had been like desecrated and all that. And he's like, and I'll give you, it felt weird and uncomfortable being there. But of course, that was probably just as much from his storytelling as anything else. But he said, now here's the really weird thing. And he goes, and I want you to pay attention to this as we walk. And he takes me outside and we go around the back of the place. And it's kind of on a hill, like a big hill. And you can see down into this valley. He goes, I have never been here. Not once have I been here and walked out back behind it and not heard coyotes. And I mean, as if his mere mentioning of it, all of a sudden you could just hear coyotes all in that valley yipping and carrying on, the way they do.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, you talk about weird.
Yipping and yapping. And
because, I mean, he definitely he said, he goes, I swear to you, every time I have come here, he goes, and it never happens until he said, it never happens till I come out back. He goes, but no matter who's with me, no matter what happens, he said, I could be in there for an hour and we'd never hear him. He goes, we can walk around this building and never hear them until I get to the back of the building. He goes, as soon as you get in the back of the building, coyotes start.
That is weird.
I was like, that is
You would think you
strange.
would hear them in the church. They would howl.
Yeah.
Why? Unless they're just so close that, your noise or whatever is alerting them.
But yeah, like I said, on cue, when he said that, they started in. And
Did you ever go back?
No, I never went back. I mean,
I never went back to that other house.
I could take you back there. Like, I know exactly where it's at if it's still there. But no, we never went back. Now, we went all kinds of other places.
Right.
Abandoned graveyards in the middle of the woods and, things like that. But that was probably the one. I mean, the only other one that comes close is there was a place that I went when I had closer to high school age. And it was, I don't think it was a barn. I think it was maybe like a machine shed kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was really big, like kind of small warehouse almost, but completely abandoned and in a very well lit, like populated area to where like you had to park kind of down the road and walk up in the ditch and kind of thing.
So you wouldn't get caught.
That one wasn't spooky as much as just like, we're going to get caught and we're all going to get in trouble.
We're going to jail.
So.
Well, how about any of the listeners out there? Do you know of any creepy abandoned sites personally? Would you or have you adventured there with hopes to pull back the thin veils that separate life from death? We hope that we've inspired you or at least raised an eyebrow in our own storytelling tonight. Because, my friends, these are the stories that we share along our journey together on Nightmares on the Lost Highway. We are your hosts,
Bill Weirs.
And I'm Eric Tudor. Thanks for listening.
Hey, real quick, call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this. Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us. If you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us, reach out. We want to talk with you guys.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.